Okay, today we are exercising, we are continuing with supply, demand, and of course the elasticity. We will go as much as possible the elasticity, and then next lecture we will continue with the cross price elasticity and of course other chapters and topics. As we exercise in the last lecture, the demand curve, we are look up to the supply for combining together. The market supply tell how the quantity of goods supplied by the sum of producers in the market, in the aggregate level, of course. We are talking about in the micro level, of course, but it is, of course, in the aggregate level, concentrated. If the sum of producers concentrated, if one producer or one individual, then it's micro level. Quantity supplied is, of course, is the function of the price and, of course, the goods which is going to be introduced into the market. The supply curve define the aggregate quantity of goods that will be offered for sale at different prices. As you are understanding, the supply curve is the important part of the economy, which is enlarging the GDP. The QS is equal to Q multiplied with P will be calculated. When you are looking up to the supply curve as it is given here, for the wheat in Canada is an example given, is illustrated where the supplies coefficient is started from the 0.15. The law of supply continues, of course, with the demand part. The law of demand states the quantity of goods offered increase when the price of the goods is increased. Let's look at it. The supply curve shifts when the factors of the other on price change. If the change increases the willingness of producers to offer the goods, the same prices, the supply curve shifts right, as you are understanding. If the change decreases the willingness of producers to offer the good at the same price, the supply curve shifts left. A move along the supply curve for a good can only be triggered by a change in the price of that good. A shift in the supply curve for a good can be triggered by a change in any other factor, a change that affect the producer's willingness to offer the good. When we are calculating the supply curve, QS is equal to, in a simplest example again, P plus 0.05 R is, of course, then the average rainfall estimated. Then you are observing here, suppose the price is 2, the quantity is 2, and of course quantity supply if the rainfall is 3, which is estimated 2.15, then calculate it as the equation. Let's look up it. Supply with no rain, supply with rain. When it is 3, as you are observing, it is shifted to the down. Market equilibrium. A market equilibrium is a price such that at the price the quantities demanded and supplied are the same, where it is meet the equilibrium level for desired economic satisfaction. Demand and supply curves intersect at the equilibrium level, as you know. An equilibrium level can be equalized by calculating the supply, demand, and supply and demand curves, where it is equalized and estimated. This quantity demand and quantity supplied will be then equalized in this equation. 500 minus 4p is equal to 100 minus 100 plus 2p. The supply and demand curve will be then, of course, helping him to estimate the price for the equilibrium. And of course, when we are putting the p to the equation of any supply or demand, then we will finding the demand quantity or supply quantity for the equilibrium. As you see, it is 100. Let's see. The price level, as you see, is again it's 100. Okay. The market equilibrium, if at a given price sellers cannot sell much they would like, there is excessive supply, which is overproduction. This is then of course surplus. If at a given price buyers cannot purchase as much as they would like, then there is excessive demand. As it is above the equilibrium, always we have the problem in the economy. As you see, there's an excess supply. It is shifted upper level. It is more than the equilibrium. It's not desired. If the supply is more than demand, then it is a problem, because as you see here, supply is QS, and of course demand is QD here is less than supply, and this much is of course surplus is realized in the economy, and it should be reduced. If there is no excess supply or excess demand, there is no pressure for price to change, and we are in the equilibrium. When a change in exogenous variables causes the demand curve or the supply curve to shift, the equilibrium shift as well, then we are of course using the elasticity for estimating these unexpected surpluses in the economy or scarcities. As you observe here, look up these equations. If the demand curve here is more flatter, it's then elastic, and it is helping to bring the market to the equilibrium. If the supply curve is then similarly is moving away from the equilibrium, this is then copy. When we are looking to the elasticity, as you are understanding, elasticity is the quantity change, and the price change will then helping to estimate the elasticity. The percentage change in the quantity will be divided to the percentage change in the goods, which is then calculated delta Q over Q and delta P over P. Here the Q and P is the first price. Elasticity is not the slope. Slope is the ratio of absolute change in the quantity and the prices. But when we are calculating this, then it is of course giving us the elasticity, and of course the slope of the supply and demand curves is then helping for putting into the equation for estimating the elasticity. Therefore, delta Q over delta P will then estimate as a slope. The elasticity is the ratio of the relative percentage change in the quantity and the prices. Elasticity classifications, when we are looking here, there are different conditions, and of course, if elasticity is 0, then perfectly inelastic demand is expected. Quantity demand is completely insensitive to the change in the prices. If the elasticity is between -1 and 0, then it is of course inelastic demand, which is less than 1, less than -1, then the demanded quantity is relatively insensitive to the price changes. And if the elasticity is -1, then this is then of course unitary elastic demand. The percentage increase in the quantity demanded equals percentage decrease in the price. When the elasticity is observed, then it means this is then more than -1, which is assumed to be -1, and of course to infinity. And if it is infinitive elastic, then perfectly elastic demand is assumed to be realized in the market structure. When we are looking to this demand curve, suppose QD is A minus BP. AB is a positive constant price, and note that the B is the slope. And of course, A over B is the choke price. When we are putting this to the equation, this B slope, which is replaced with delta Q over this delta change in the quantity and change in the price, multiplied with the former price and former quantity, will then gives us the elasticity. So far, demand curve slope is constant, and elasticity falls from 0 to -infinity along the demand curves. When we are applying this to the simplest example, as you see, the elasticity can be estimated by the slope, which is minus 10 is delta Q over delta P, and the P and Q can be then estimated as 30, which is given, and 100. Then the elasticity minus 3, which is elastic, as you are understanding, if the elasticity is higher than minus 1, will then of course become elastic. Elasticity linear demand curve, as much as the as much as this demand curve become flatter and parallel to the horizontal, then will become elastic. As you are understanding here, we are calling this region is elastic region, and this then inelastic region. This is then of course infinitive, negatively infinitive, and this then of course here 0, where we are supposing inelastic, and if it is minus 1, then it's of course supposed to be elastic. Constant elasticity of demand is supposed to be here, as you are observing in this equation as it is given. Then we may put the equation this, then of course you see then price and the constant elasticity demand when it is 0 and minus infinity along the demand curve. Observe price and quantity when we are putting in this curve. You are observing, you see, constant elasticity, linear elasticity. This is linear, this is linear, this is constant elasticity. Yeah. Then factors which is affecting the price elasticity of demand. Let's look up the demand tends to be more price elastic when there are good substitutes for the goods. Demand tends to be more price elastic when consumer expenditures in that good is large, and demand tends to be less price elastic when consumer considers the good as necessity. When we are looking on it, you are observing here the elastic, inelastic. You see, less than 1, higher than 1, less than 1, again, example. Okay, then the elasticity, when we are looking here, can be estimated as, again, as in given equation. And the supply elasticity is your understand, then we are concentrating to the supply now instead of demand. Price elasticity of supply similarly, but now we are concentrating to the supply equation. Income elasticity, again, when we are concentrating, then we are calculating not the price, but we are adding the income here. The differences in quantity, difference in income will be then estimated as you are observing. Delta Q over delta I is multiplied by the income, former income, the disposable income the first, and quantity demand in the first. Cross price elasticity, of course, the measures degree of shift of demand curves when the price of another goods changes. The demand is affected when another goods prices change for the market. Yeah, it is given again, some similar applications. The cross price elasticity, when it is changed, then you are observing how it is affecting and changing the market structure. The price elasticity demand, the cross price elasticity demand is estimated for Coke and the Pepsi, as you are observing here, is less than 1, it is more than minus 1 price elasticity, and here again more than 1 for the income elasticity of the demand for the cross price elasticity, which is important between Coke and Pepsi, where it is, if the Coke price is reduced, how it is affecting the Pepsi, for example, is the cross price. If the Pepsi reduced price, what will be the Coke? Okay. Now looking up to the equilibrium. Let's look up this linear demand curve. Suppose this is then given. The elasticity is given. Elasticity for price, quantity demanded is minus P, P over Q. Well known, distance slope, delta Q over delta P. We have the example here. P is 0.7, Q is 70, and elasticity minus 0.55. Then when we are putting on this equation, then this will give us this slope 55. Then we put here 55. Then we are estimating A and B. You see? Then we have the equation. Constant elasticity of demand. Suppose demand is QD is an AP. Again is given. We are using the same method. We are calculating first. We are putting this in equation and estimate it. Okay. Is given again. Linear demand curve, constant elasticity, demand curve. Yeah. Okay, as shift in the supply curve reveals the slope of the demand curve, as shift in the demand curve reveals the slope of the supply curve. What is this? Shift in the supply curve. Let's look up this old point. P1, Q1, new equilibrium P2, Q2. Both equilibrium points will lie on the same line, linear demand curve. Therefore, if QD is A minus BP, then B is estimated as, from the equation. This is the slope. And A is A, then it will be used and estimated by this. Then let's look up the shifts. The new supply will be realized here because price increased. Again, shift in the supply, as we see. The old and new demand and supply is illustrated here when the price changes, realized upper level. You see, P1 goes to P2, Q1 is, of course, estimated similarly. Then we come to the conclusion to our elasticity. We are concentrated to the supply demand and, of course, elasticity, cross price elasticity. Price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, price elasticity of income, and of course, cross price elasticity was our lecture topics. See you next lecture.